Focus on cutting calories and cardio. Jesus Christ, you've got an 80-pound gut. Well, buddy, welcome to the channel where the entire point of my recent vlog series is acknowledging that I'm too fat and how I am losing the weight. What's up, guys? It is Dr. Seth, and welcome back to another one of these videos where I'm going through recent YouTube comments and the Instagram AMA I put out to answer some of your questions, and I'm going to try to run this a little bit faster this time so that it is more fun. How much time and effort should someone put into PL if ultimately they don't want to compete? However much time and effort you find to be rewarding and you find to be fulfilling, because if you're not competing, you're doing this for fun. Even if you are competing, you're doing this for fun. So put enough into it that you feel like you're getting something positive out of it. If you feel like putting more into it sucks, put less into it. If you feel like putting less into it makes it less fun because you're getting less good, put more into it. Doesn't need to be complicated. Do what makes you happy and what makes you stoked. What should I do on my next max effort lower day? I don't know. Do something that builds off of your previous max effort lower day and challenges you in a way that will allow you to improve. A mild lower back pain / discomfort when benching and arching on squats. Should I be worried? Well, I'm worried because we probably shouldn't be trying to arch on squats because it isn't 1990 and you're not trying to squat in a multiply meet. And even if you are trying to squat in a multiply meet, it isn't 1990, so we should be trying to brace rather than just extending the shit out of our spines while squatting, because we'll be able to have more control and more stability and put more weight on the bar. Now, if we do have low back pain while arching on bench, we probably just lack tolerance to hip extension with lumbar extension, so I would get better at creating hip extension with lumbar extension, and a good way to do that is by training a Bulgarian split squat where we're trying to get as much hip extension as we can, pushing into a hip flexor stretch, and then squeezing the back leg out of the bottom. Considerations for using pullovers for thoracic or scapular mobility. Well, we're going to want to start light enough that we can actually access enough range to get a stretch. If you go too heavy on a pullover, you're going to be like cutting it here because you feel like you're going to die. So start light enough that you actually can get the sucker back. Then once we kind of establish a weight that we can work with and get a stretch, progress up in load and try to progress up in range as you're progressing up in load. If you start adding load at the expense of range, we're not going to be getting the flexibility benefit out of it. Feeling pain around upper hamstring during ascent of squats and deadlifts. Any advice? Well, without seeing it, without knowing where things are doing, number one thing we want to do is make sure we're managing load on squats and deadlifts so that we are not pissing it off over and over again. We want to kind of like touch it, but not so much that it really, really sucks, because if we can kind of touch it, we can then build it up. I'd also want to look at ways that we can challenge the region outside of squatting and deadlifting. And again, without knowing it, without knowing what training looks like, it's hard to say what that is, but we'll probably want to do some sort of hamstring adductor hip extension training that we can handle and build up to then build back into our squats and deadlifts. Sister-in-law has slightly knock knees and issues getting to depth. Knees tend to narrow going down. Again, I don't know what it looks like. I might suspect that maybe her stance is too narrow for her anatomy, or maybe her adductors are too weak to manage knee path. And if it is just a little bit of knee valgus and she's already knock-kneed, I might not even be worried about it depending on how it looks. Knee pain with squat, but almost none with leg extension. What can be the cause? Well, if we're thinking about a leg extension, that's just lower leg moving, upper leg totally static. If we're thinking about a squat, we got to control where the upper leg is in relation to the knee and then in relation to the lower leg. So I would assume that we suck at controlling the hip, and for some reason that is causing our brain to perceive threat when we are squatting. So I'd probably look at doing some shit at the hip to gain some control, and then incorporating that control into doing shit at the hip and the knee at the same time. Low back pain during bench. See previous question. Deadlift more than my squat and slow off the floor even though I am quad dominant. Well, if you deadlift more than you squat and you're quad dominant, your squat technique might suck, or you might not be that quad dominant. And even if you are quad dominant, maybe your hamstrings and low back and glutes stuck to the point that you can't express that quad dominance during the deadlift. So there's some things that you could be thinking about. Was that too harsh? No? Okay. How much lifting per week would be considered overtraining for natural lifters? I don't fucking know. I don't know how much you can handle. I don't know what you can do. I don't know how good of shape you're in. If you're overtraining, you're overtraining. Like, I can handle more volume than some natural lifters. I can handle less volume than some unnatural lifters. I can handle the amount of volume that I can handle. You could handle the amount of volume that you can handle, and trying to like blanket statement how much volume is good for a natural lifter, but how much volume is not good for a untested lifter is just stupid, because powerlifting is not a math equation. We're not just blanket statementing this is how much volume you do to get better. We need to do the appropriate amount of volume for the lifter in front of us to get better. And if you are overtraining, you're going to know that you're overtraining, and most people are not overtraining. Most people are barely getting fatigued and then crying because they're pansies and thinking they're overtraining, and that's why they end up sucking. That was probably too harsh. I'm going to roll with it though. Things to work on for full shoulder flexion. Well, good place to start would be the pullover question I just answered, because doing pullovers for shoulder flexion intent can be a very good way to gain that back, as could something as simple as just hanging from a chin-up bar. Do you have an approximate time frame as to when you may compete at 220? I don't know, dude. Your guess is as good as mine. I'm just kind of letting the weight come off at a rate that is relatively aggressive, but I still am limited by how quickly the weight is going to come off. And ultimately, I have no idea when I will actually be light enough. I'm doing my damnedest to get it off as quickly and painlessly as possible, but I mean, I gotta lose weight, and that takes time. So, not holding myself to any firm dates, but in a perfect world, sometime early 2025 at the latest that I'd like to. But I mean, if it has to be later than that, I'm going to put the time in necessary to make it happen in a good way. And back to YouTube for this one. Congratulations on the massive weight loss. Could you comment on your deficit amount, please? I really don't know. So, like, when I'm dieting, I don't track macros, I don't track calories, I track food. And the reason I do that is it just makes it simpler in my head to manipulate food amounts rather than manipulating macro amounts and calorie amounts. And like, yes, I could just punch my food into my fitness pal and get the calories, then I could estimate what my, my basal rate of food calorie consumption should be, and then calculate my deficit off of basal's the wrong word. I don't know what word am I looking for? Maintenance is the right word. See, I'm running a big enough deficit that I forgot the word maintenance. But my point is that, like, I could calculate my hypothetical maintenance, figure out how much food I'm eating, then give you a number, but I also don't really care enough to comment that. And I just know that it's big enough that my numbers are trending down at a rate that I am at least okay with, but I don't feel like I'm going to die that much. So it's working to my satisfaction. Drop the secrets to getting those calves. And I used to think that it was just genetics until when I was in the school clinic, like internship dealio in Cairo School in Florida, and I bought myself a BMX bike for the first time in years. I was back riding the skate park, and I was like, holy shit, my calves are smoked. And getting back on the bike again, I was recently reminded of how freaking smoked my calves are. And I really just think that, like, my calves are not a result of anything I've done training wise, because I really don't train them. They've always just been there. And I think it's because of all of the motocross and all of the bicycle riding I did as a kid, where I am on the balls of my feet on foot pegs or pedals and basically doing a calf race for like 18 hours a day. When is shoulder surgery warranted? Well, I think the best answer is going to be when the individual is unable to rehab it successfully without surgery. Because for some people, they might be able to rehab something really, really, really gnarly because they're willing to put in the time, effort, and go through the discomfort. For other people, they may not be able to rehab that because they aren't willing to put in the time, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the practitioner. So some things, some people, depending on their circumstances, they might be better off getting surgery than someone who is better off going through a solid rehab plan. Now, do I think that a lot of shoulder surgeries are unnecessary? With my biases, probably. And speaking from experience, I've had a handful of labrum and rotator cuff repairs on this side. I've been told that I need labrum and rotator cuff repairs on that side. That side has not been done. Yes, it is sloppier, but it works and feels a whole lot better than this side, even after getting the pec done on this side. Sumo is cheating. Dude, you have no idea how much I wish that I could just like line up to a bar with a wide stance and have it feel amazing. Like, if I could do that and like pull more than my conventional, like there is no question that I would be a sumo puller. And like, it's honestly like one of the most frustrating things about powerlifting career, how consistently less good than conventional sumo has been. And like, I am making some headway, but like, I'm still like, my best sumo this training cycle so far was 585 for 6. I've done 585 for 14 conventional, and it felt way better. So yeah, sumo, cheating just because it makes me sad. Tore my pec. 16 weeks post surgery. Lat/shoulder girdle is lacking. Your go to movements. So I don't want to step on your surgeon's or physical therapist's post rehab protocol, and I don't want to tell you to do anything that puts you at any risk depending on how your surgery was performed and what your guidelines are, yada, 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 disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. But with myself and getting my shit back, when I was trying to get more range out that way, a lot of my getting more range out that way was by doing band pull aparts to help get rear delt to catch on and to help with my ability to retract scapula. When I was trying to get range back that way, a lot of my getting range back that way was with straight arm pull downs to try to get lat and serratus to kick on. So if you haven't been hammering those guys might be worth hammering if you can do them in a way that does not present risk to the completion of your pec recovery, because in some circumstances it might be worth holding off on that shit to let the thing heal better, depending on how it was reattached and the extent of the repairs. And last question of the day: best exercises to help stay tight at the top of a squat and a deadlift. I think the best exercise to stay tight at the top of a squat and a deadlift is to have a training partner that will yell at you if you're getting lazy with positioning at the top of your squats and deadlifts. If you have someone screaming at you to stay tight every time you get loose at the top of your squat, you're going to know when you're getting loose, and therefore you can then tighten up from that position. Now, if it isn't just like a laziness, being deliberate, having the discipline to stay tight thing that we can just fix by yelling at you, and it is some sort of strength thing, we might just want to question, like, what is getting loose? What are we not able to hold in position? If it is upper back, I might want to think of just doing some paused pull downs, really just trying to squeeze into that upper back. If it is upper back on a deadlift, I might want to think about doing some paused straight arm pull downs with the cable. My armrests are in the way, but really trying to squeeze into that. I might want to think about pausing some rows. I might want to think about doing some GHR sit-ups with a pause at the bottom if it is brace. I just want to expose whatever's getting loose to some time under tension so we can get better at holding the time under tension, and hopefully that does carry back to the lift. But for most people, it really is just a matter of realizing when they're getting loose, being yelled at so they know to correct it, and then correcting it and having the discipline to continue correcting it so that they stop getting loose. But guys, that is what I got for today's edition of the YouTube AMA video. Thank you so much for watching. Peace out. Have a good night.